Hello, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live, How to Build Resilience Without Losing the Benefits of Just-in-Time Inventory. We appreciate your interest in the topic. I'll start by mentioning that this session is being recorded and the link to the on-demand version will be sent to all registrants and attendees. At the end of this discussion, we will have time for Q&A, so be sure to send in your questions. If we are unable to get to your question, we will follow up with you after the LinkedIn Live. Today, we will be enjoying a panel discussion between leaders from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and GEP. We are joined by Joanna Kostecka, the Vice President of Global Operations Planning and Materials Management at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Joanna leads a multi-year digital process and talent transformation of HPE's planning and materials management functions. She has broad accountability for driving and executing innovative strategies, risk and crisis management, and ensuring compliance. From GEP, we have David Doran, the Vice President of Consulting Services. David brings 20 plus years of deep experience in the design, sourcing, and implementation of supply chain improvements to GEP clients on a global basis. David's areas of expertise include transportation operations and strategy, network optimization, supply chain optimization, global trade management, and strategic transportation sourcing. Also from GEP, we have Binayak Shrestha, the Global Head of Services Delivery. As one of the key members of the consulting team, Binayak is responsible for large-scale strategic engagements, delivering sustainable cost savings and process improvement across various industries. Today's discussion will be moderated by Steve Banker, the Vice President of Supply Chain Management at ARC Advisory Group. Steve heads up the supply chain and logistics consulting team at ARC. Steve has authored many market research and strategy reports and has managed consulting projects for manufacturers, retailers, software providers, and venture capital firms. Steve, at this point, I'll pass it over to you to kick off the conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. Well, when I look at the title, it starts with how to build resilience. And as I listen to what's going around in the industry, I often hear the words resilience and agility used as if they're the same thing. And in my mind, they're not. In my mind, resilience is what you do to prepare for either upside opportunities or more often problems that are going to hit your supply chain. The agility is the actual response to these events. So as far as resilience, you do have to prepare your people, but I think technology is also critical. And I've been doing a study of what at ARC we call multi-enterprise supply chain networks for the last few years. Gartner also does studies in this area. They call it multi-enterprise business networks or business supply chain networks. And it is the critical solution for being able to act with agility. And yet, most people have never heard this term, multi-enterprise supply chain networks. So exactly what is an MESN? An MESN is a public cloud solution with a many-to-many architecture. That means many participants can interact and collaborate with many other folks. And on top of this network, you have the ability to do order fulfillment execution. And in fact, you have execution applications. So, Joanna, I think a multi-enterprise supply chain network is critical for any company, but arguably I would say it's even more critical for a large company with a really complex supply chain. I think that describes HPE's supply chain, right?
I would agree with that. So let me maybe start, Steve, with saying a little bit, who we are as HPE. So HPE, short for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, we are a $28 billion, Fortune 500 company. We are an information technology solutions company. And in 2019, our CEO, Antonio Neri, announced that we would pivot from servers and on-site storage and compute solutions to software as a service platform, GreenLake, a hybrid cloud platform that will allow our clients not just store data in the cloud or compute data in the cloud, but will really help manage it across, a multitude of locations across the world, really, the globe. So we are an edge to cloud software as a service company. Where the complexity comes is we still, when you look at it from the supply chain perspective, we still need to build a server. And we are a complex company. We have our own factories, but we have also factories that we have outsourced that build, our products. And like many other companies that, build any products, and especially when you are in technology, we are a multi-level supply chain. So, and especially in times of supply chain challenges, you vividly discover just how many multi-layers you are, and especially if your supply chain problems touch you at those, lower layers of your supply chain. We're a global company, which means our supply chain, is global. Our locations are global, and we store our inventory, right, of our components, again, globally. And with that, what it means is that we forecast multiple locations, and since I own planning and I own materials management, we have the challenge of having to, again, forecast multiple locations, which means your forecast error, right? The more locations you have to forecast, the bigger your forecast error is going to be, the bigger potential for actually missing your customer requirements if you're going wrong with that forecast is going to be. And the bigger opportunity for error in being able to fulfill that material if something goes wrong when your inventory lives in multiple locations. And on top of that, when portions of your supply chains are being outsourced and they are managed through, your supply chain partners, that means that your visibility to what is actually happening there is not quite there or is severely delayed. All of that builds complexity that gets severely tested when you're experiencing supply chain disruptions like, we've all been experiencing.
And David and Ben, you folks are from GEP, and you are the multi-enterprise supply chain network being used by Joanna and HPE. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's distinctive about your solution and what's differentiating.
Yeah, sure, Steve. So I'll handle that one if it makes sense. So you're right. We heard a lot about the multi-enterprise, right? So it's key to know that we look at this from technology side, from service side, and from partner side. The core element of this is that we are really the very best collaborative platform out there that was built from that multi-enterprise point of view, right? It's core to how our development was created for this. We're really a well-defined buy-sell platform in that complex trading partner relationship that Joanna mentioned, the multi-echelon areas of this, where some production is in-house, some is outsourced. Suppliers are the best of the best and really, very, very far and wide reach. And so we've designed that with the intention of helping companies like HP just get better in this space. And we layer that over the 20 years experience that we have in supply chain and procurement core capabilities built on a flexible low code platform. So the technology is there, and that's what we really like about that, from the GP solution. But we augment that in two other kind of critical areas. One is that within GP, right, we have managed services, which are the core resources so that we augment Joanna's team. So we get in there and our team work hand in hand with Joanna's regional resources to make sure the products are flowing throughout this. And then we also have the consulting services side, people like myself that come at this. And so we try to fix the problems as we see them. And we work very well, with the HB team to get this done. So between the supply chain consulting work, it's with the outsourced managed services, the people side of this is really taken care of. And then finally on this, kind of the other last distinct leg that we stand on here is that we by design, right? The same design that we work this from technology to say, this is, we work with a multi-echelon supply network out there. We have a multi-echelon partner network within us under Alliance. And so we got some great partners between Alliance, Apollo, and BNP Paribas to really bring in, some other depth of services that we would not, have by ourselves. And we can leverage clients like HP or others that are out there. So it really is, the technology drives this, but the other areas enable this. And we hopefully then finally the culture makes sense. And so we'll talk more, you can mention more about this, I think, coming up later, but this is an important area, is, the culture mix is a distinctive area for us. And we're pretty pleased about that as well in the marketplace as we, go on this journey with HP.
Steve, if I could just add a little bit to that, towards what makes this journey so unique. Historically, when companies have tackled it, they've tried to tackle it internally. They've tried to tackle it, one process at a time, such as demand planning, or kind of forecasting, or look at their operations in a silo. But really looking at this holistically, end to end, globally, right? I mean, across all the materials, across all the suppliers, having an approach to tackle this across multiple phases, bringing all the partners together. So it's a creation of the future, and it's really an enterprise-wide transformation, not just a supply chain and procurement one.
Joanne, another question for you. I want to hear a little bit about the implementation, when you get started. And I just want to make an observation. I've talked to a lot of folks over the years that have implemented a lot of different supply chain applications. And it's just a fact. No implementation is flawless. There's always a little bit of pain involved. So maybe you could tell us about the implementation and how it went.
Yeah, so we're still implementing, right? We are on the journey, right? What we are doing is we are implementing basically, we are like I mentioned earlier, right? We have our location across the globe. So literally, we think about it as 3 regions, right? One being Americas, one being EMEA, and the other one being Asia. So we're implementing 3 regional hubs, so 1 hub per region. We went live with the hub in EMEA, and we're still deploying additional, suppliers and additional capabilities. But we went live with the first, stage of that hub, and throughout 23, we'll be deploying the other regions and the additional capabilities and the other suppliers. So we are very well on the journey. We're far away from being done. Well, far away. A year goes by, I guess, in a blink. So far away maybe isn't the right term, but we are on the way, right? We're still marching on that journey. But getting here, right? Definitely the road is never smooth, right? There are always bumps in the road. But I would say, given some other implementations, right? And, when you have lived in supply chain, for a certain amount of years in your career, you have gone through certain implementations, whether they are IT systems or whatever other solutions. You expect certain things to happen and you plan for them, you get ready for them. I would say that comparing with those other ones, this has gone, I would say, really smooth. Yes, there are things that happen and there are things that we need to react to as a team, right? Both on our HPE side as well as GEP side. But I think we have a really good working structure, and things are being tackled, head on as and when they happen, with the right level and sense of urgency, without leaving, so to speak, dead bodies, on the road behind us, which is always important. And key and critical decisions are being taken on what's really key and critical and core to being done now, and what is nice to have and can come with the next release. So I think that kind of agility of mindset of, okay, what is the best course of action to still keep moving forward and driving progress and driving implementation. And really the big motto that we have come up with right at the start of the journey, as we were, storming, norming, and doing big workshops around the whole thing, is don't let perfection stand in the way of good enough. And really going for that good enough and driving continuous, progress to it has been, the path forward, and probably has been one of those things that allowed us to make significant progress along the journey. So in a nutshell, there are bumps in the road, but I think we've been pretty successful in navigating them so far. I think I'm going to touch wood here and kind of knock it off so that nothing major happens. But that would be my take on it, and I'm sure David and Bean have their point of view on the same.
Yeah, well, I heard you say you didn't want to leave any dead bodies behind. I certainly wouldn't want that either. So I'm glad that has not happened. Ben and David, what would you say the best practices are to get ready for this kind of implementation?
Maybe, Steve, I could start. I think there's few key critical success factors. And I would say the first one is having that sponsorship spine and that alignment, at the highest level of the organization, because this is an enterprise-wide transformation. And, when we look at companies who've done it successfully, I mean, these are initiatives that rise to the number 1, 2, or 3, kind of versus it being just another implementation that's number 10 or 20, down the totem pole. But I think there's few others from an alignment perspective. You need IT, supply chain, procurement, as well as finance to be holding hands in this journey, because there are dependencies, there are risks to be managed. There is obviously the operations that is ongoing. And, you never want to be in a situation where the elephant goes through and the tail is stuck, right? So when things don't work out, to be able to overwhelm with response, I think it's a critical success factor. I would also say maybe a third thing, which we've recognized as being underestimated, and a point of failure, where you can never underestimate the amount of change when we go through these transformations with suppliers, with your partners, with your internal teams, with your systems, with processes, that could be, kind of legacy, and ones that kind of need to be transformed over time. So I think those are some of the kind of top success criteria that I would call out.
Yeah, certainly people don't like change. David, anything to add there?
Yeah, so thanks. I actually go kind of writing on BIM's, kind of 3 points, and bring it down a level, right? So I think people want to get out of this to say, okay, here's the vision, here's what you can do and transform your supply chain. But it is always a question we have with clients is how, right? And what does it take to get there? So let me address that kind of middle level strategy work, which absolutely you're spot on. We have to have, a key spokesperson like Joanna, incredibly intelligent at what she does, and all the way to the top leadership of HP behind this. But when you go about doing this, right, really getting down and say, how do you make this work? Three areas. One is I always look to empower a very finite cross-functional team, right? And I don't mean cross-functional team within the supply chain, right? We're now cross-functional globally. And so not only it's supply management, it's materials management, global logistics, planning, forecasting, but then into IT, sales, legal, finance, tax, and audit. Really it is a comprehensive team to get put in place the first time. And when you have global clients like HP and the global functions they have, there's multiple different regional perspectives of this too, and then extend that out into your supply partner areas as well too. So it's a very large team. They have to be empowered to get this done. They have to be cross-functional. When you talk about that, you want the people also to be individuals that are not just yes men. You don't want them to be in there and say, yes, this can be done, or the worst is this is the way it's always been done. The digital process, the transformational process is about making change. And so you have to have those individuals that want to get it done. They're focused and flexible in what they do, but, don't say yes and no. They kind of live outside the box. And then I would say third is be transparent in what you want to accomplish. So when I say that, it's about have common metrics in place, but not just common metrics for you within the organization on this journey, but again, extend this outside and make it something that's relevant. So if you have the goal of this is to increase ready to build in a contract manufacturing site or something, around margin for the company, have those designed and put in in paper so that everybody understands this. So that those are kind of the areas is strategy, but then it comes to people, process, technology, products. There's some core elements of this that you really do need to take a look at to get this done.
Yeah, and as I hear you talk, right? I mean, you could implement a warehouse management system, and you're dealing with a warehouse team, but we're dealing with a much bigger process with, a much broader set of both internal and external players. It just makes it, I guess it just makes it a bigger hill to climb, I guess.
Well, and there was something that Mark said before, Mark Baker within HP, paraphrase a little bit, is, it's like going in, if you're buying a house, right? All the plumbing's in there and all works fine. If you're going to go and renovate a house, now you've got to really get into plumbing. Now you've really got to figure out, what pipes lead where, why those things were designed in the first place. So we're not building a new house, we're renovating a house. And that's a very different mentality to go in with, to say, as Joanna said, it's not going to be perfect. There'll be bumps in the road. But you have the ultimate goal in mind. You have leaders that are willing to take the risk and get out there a little bit further and lead from the front. It actually works pretty well.
Yeah. And Joanna, you're not all the way through this, but you're part way through it. I'm sure you've learned some lessons along the way. Is there anything you would do differently?
Whatever, and you know it, and it's part of every project management, right? Always assume that you will need more time than what you're assuming at the beginning. And we did that, and we still ran out of time on certain things, right? They still took longer than what we assumed. I think the biggest portion that was the biggest surprise was actually the contractual piece, right? That was the one that we found we really underestimated, even though we gave it a lot of time. It still took more, because again, the complexity of it isn't just us with GEP, right? You're talking, all those partners that we involve, all those suppliers, right? If I just think about the testing that we were doing when we were launching EMEA, right? It took literally 195 people across 8 companies to do system integration testing. That's the size of complexity you're talking to launch something like this, and really goes back to what you were talking about, multi-enterprise, multi-echelon, end. So really, all those steps in the process, that is complexity upon complexity, and things will take longer than what you're assuming, whereas, you really want to go fast, right? Because again, in times like this, there is limited patience for how long it's going to take till you're actually going to get to some results. But certain things, they will take time, right? And then you have to be really creative on how do you make up for that time on something else, right? So that constant creativity and having enough of really smart people on the team, on both teams, is really critical. And David mentioned that, right? Who we have on the team, just on our side, right, are people from across the company. These are not just supply chain people, right? We have everybody in supply chain, from planning, materials management, sourcing, you name it, right? Logistics, engineering, it's literally everyone. But we also have finance, we have suppliers on the team, we have our, partners who build products for us, and, right? The amount of different people on the team is just, to a degree, mind-blowing.
Yeah. And Joanna, the other thing I want to ask, you're not all the way through it, right? But you began this journey for some reason. There was something that made you decide that you needed to do this. And I've talked to other companies that have begun the journey. This is an agility solution. So sometimes something bad happened in their supply chain, like a tsunami in Japan, or a big boat stuck in the Suez Canal, and they just knew they needed to get more agile. And other companies I've talked to, they care about customer service. They have ways of seeing how their customers think about them. And if it looked like the customers were, their opinion was starting to get lower, that could be impetus for this kind of project. Were either of those two things impetus for you to get going, or was there something else? Or just talk about HPE's thought process here, please.
Sure. Yeah. Probably to a degree, but it was more around, we're big, we're complex, right? I talked about that complexity at the beginning of our conversation. And, when you are in supply chain, things are going to happen, right? It was COVID already happened, and you sit there and think, what else is going to happen, right? And you very quickly understand that, visibility is king, right? Command and control, right? Which we lacked, right? Because when you're this complex and you're this remote of being able to manage directly and see immediately or real time what is happening in your supply chain, your ability to react is so much slower, right? So that was the direct, kind of trigger to say, okay, we need to do things differently, right? We still want to be able to operate the network that we operate, and we still want to be able to build the product the way that we build, but we want to be able to actually see things. We want to be able to see things real time, right? We want to know where our inventory is. We want to be able to know that our forecast has been taken the way we have built it, that there were no misjudgments on that forecast and what was passed on to the suppliers potentially. We want to know that, the suppliers have actually received it, they have confirmed it. We want to know that the POs have been placed to that forecast, that they have been acknowledged, that the products are actually arriving, and we want to consolidate it in those 3 places in the globe. And we want the factories, whether they are ours or they are our partners, we want them just to pull. So you shorten that lead time for the factories, because now they are just pulling versus waiting for the whole, lead time from the suppliers. We have command and control because we see it real time, right? We have direct, view into what happens, in the platform, right? So that power is there that today, we lack in several areas. So you shortcut all those deficiencies right there, and you speed up your supply chain, and you speed up your reaction to whatever is happening that today may be so much more challenging. So that was our impetus. There is just so much happening in supply chain. And yes, we all hope that, times will be better, but let's be honest, right? If you have worked in supply chain for some time, there will be this next something. There will be something, because there is always something. That's just the nature of what supply chain is. So you want to be ready, and you want to be at the forefront of that versus just doing firefighting. You would like to be at the forefront of those things and be able to have a shorter reaction time than maybe somebody else.
Yeah. And you're not all the way through this journey, but you have done some work in India. Are you starting to see that certainty and that better ability to react to what's going on in the India now that you've got this?
No, that's in EMEA, actually. That's not in India. That's
okay.
in EMEA. Yes. So we have visibility into the platform. We're starting to see what is going on, right? We're in early stages. So, I can't talk to any specific reactions just yet. So far, so good. Things are going per plan. So we haven't had any specific actions that we have yet had to take. But yes, only time will tell.
Right. And Joanna, some of the things we talk about here, when you put the business case together, you can't really quantify. And it's hard to quantify customer service, for example. But were there any places in your business case where you thought, okay, we will get cost savings from X?
Yeah.
And if so, what is X?
What is X? Well, definitely X will come from, you will have lower forecast error, because like I said, you're not, you're not going to forecast 20 something places in the world. You're going to forecast 3. So your forecast error is going to reduce, and therefore your fill rate to customers is going to improve. So your revenue should increase, and you're going to have lower inventory and less excess and obsolete inventory, because again, it's going to be 3 places, right? So the level of safety stock that you will carry is going to be lower, because again, it's not in 20 places, it's in 3. So hopefully you're right sizing your inventory much better because you have it in 3 places, and you're shortening the time, that your manufacturing partners and your own factories will have when they pull that inventory, into their locations, because it's going to be stored, in those 3 locations in the world. So it is around, those benefits that we are expecting to see. So definitely better fill rate to to the customers and overall, lower inventory levels.
Beautiful. And David and Ben, you're out there talking to customers. What kind of problems are they trying to solve that that they're talking to you about potentially doing work with you?
Absolutely. So, Steve, just to kind of add to the earlier question, I think when we look at our outlook for 2023, I mean, these disruptions are not going anywhere. Right? You take a look at, lockdowns in China, still happening. You take a look at the impact that the war, Russia-Ukraine has had. The driest weather, the world has witnessed, especially in Europe last year. Inflation, right? That is at a kind of 40-year high. And the list just goes on. So all of these kind of macroeconomic climate, we believe, will continue into 23. And we just, published our 2023 supply chain and procurement outlook as well, for those who want to read about it. But I think there's, three main kind of themes, kind of catalysts for action that emerge. I would say the number one concern, based on any survey that we did with the economists, is cost pressure. The number one and number two, areas of concern are the cost of raw materials and the cost of labor. And we expect that to continue, perhaps even deepen as we move into 23. So a lot of customers, coming to us for help, both on the supply chain side, how do we use digitalization as well as your resource support, to drive that higher ROI on the value side. I would say the second big theme is around driving operational efficiency with digitalization. So similar, to the project, the initiative that we have with HPE, how can we be less dependent on people? How can we be less dependent on processes and tribal knowledge? Based on another survey that we did, 85% of the respondents don't know what to do with their data. They have multiple sources of truth, right? So when you have safety stock coming from one data system, you have your demand coming from another system, how you should be allocating, to different suppliers across the board based on capacity, based on price, based on relationship is coming from a different source. It becomes very difficult to action the data that you already have. So again, kind of bringing all of those together on one platform, and how do you put on that digital mindset, is number two. I would say another key theme that we're also seeing where our customers are looking to us kind of more at a broader level is a deeper commitment to ESG and sustainability. And one example that I wanted to kind of share with the group is the war that Russia instigated on Ukraine. It wasn't governments that took the charge. There were over 150 corporations, and many of you that are on this call, who took action to exit, right, to push out, and are considering different actions that they could take from a corporate stewardship. And I think that's how I think companies are stepping up to make sure they're not just focused on the operations and the efficiencies and the ROI and the value, but also making sure that their corporate goals are heard. So I think it's an exciting time for supply chain and procurement to step up.
Ben, I read that Economist report. It was a first-rate piece of research. David,
thank you.
Anything you want to add here?
No, I agree with obviously everything that Ben said. There was the other report we looked at last year was one, and it was so think about this pre-recession, and now we know all the conversations we're having and the kind of the economic impacts we're looking at here. But as of last year, we did a survey, and 80% of the companies came back and said that they expect to have direct revenue loss due to supply chain disruptions. Dug a little bit further into that and said, well, what's the impact of this? And then 1 in 3 anticipated an impact of over 6% in top line revenue loss, with 1 in 12 saying the impact could be 10 to 20%. The reason why I give those numbers is because there are some things, and disruptions are definitely not really planned, but I would disagree with that. And so we mentioned the macroeconomics, the wars, the COVID shutdowns, the Suez Canal issues, right? Those things I think are those which you, as you stated, have to have the resiliency built in. But the other one is we look at this, and Ben mentioned a couple of these points, that we actually look at it through 2 other lenses at GEP when it's talking about clients. And And one is there are a number of external related factors which you can control. And as you said, you have to build resiliency into control this, as we're doing here with HP. And that's around the issues that Joanna mentioned. It's, the inventory availability, inventory visibility, forecast accuracy, supply shortages. Where's the product? Where should it be? Is it the right place, the right time, and the right price? Those are things which are now in control of good supply chains, right? You can have those steps forward to get there. And I'll also talk about, then price and kind of financial volatility as well too, right? You can start controlling those. It's not have to be in the back end saying I can't control it. We believe that yes, you can. But then also disruptions, when we look at this, are an internal factor too. And so again, I'm trying to step out of the macro environments and say, what do you have which are internal disruptors? And this may be something that clients will look at enough. And I think they really should. And it generally falls into two areas. We'll make it more macro, more high level this. And one is the HR resources. And studies are showing that our population is aging, that we are having fewer gray hairs out there and fewer people willing, to work in manufacturing and development sites, et cetera. So all this has to get done. To get that, then we need to make sure that we have, the right HR capabilities. So as society gets older, we can replace them. That's an area of disruption that we're just starting to wrap our arms around. And then the other one is technology. The average ERP systems, you may get a refresh every 5 to 7 years, but really a lot of the ERP systems in major manufacturers out there are over a decade, possibly up to 2 decades old. And when you think about now, how do you take that in transformation? Those are just 2 weak points inside of organizations that I think a lot of companies have not planned well enough for. So look at the macro and look at those you can control internally and externally as well too. And that's where the disruptions are going to be much more frenzied frequency going forward. Right. That's what I was talking about.
That ERP point is interesting. I mean, even if an ERP is not aging, an ERP is designed to look at an extended supply chain from my point of view. It's not designed to, it wasn't designed from the beginning to manage a complex multi-trading partner kind of supply chain. Just my 2 cents.
No, it's a great point. That's why I even started with that. Like in this environment with this supply chain solution, the collaboration platform we have was built with that intention. So it changes the scope, it changes the optics at which we view things. And now we bring that with HP, to bear the market. So it's great.
Yeah.
And just to add, I think
Yeah.
in terms of organizations like HPE, I mean, this is a strategic bet. And I think, there's companies still asking the question, are we in a recession? And there's other organizations that are taking action regardless of where we are, because we are here, as supply chain organizations to support our top line growth, right? To, have operational efficiency. So as we're in this climate, there's also companies that are looking at these strategic bets as investments so they can future-proof for the future, because those disruptions are going to happen one after the other.
Joanna, I know what's next on your agenda. It's to keep rolling this solution out to other regions of the world. But beyond that, what's next on your supply chain journey?
Yeah, so what we're doing in parallel, in fact, is we're exchanging our whole planning solution, right? So we're getting rid of what we're on today, and we're changing to, advanced planning solution for the very same reason, right? The solutions that were right and modern some years ago, they just don't stand, the test of time today, and they don't fit, who we are as a company and the complexity of what we are. We're configured to order company. We've got more than 100,000, sellable SKUs. Our customers, they can configure, whatever they want, right? When you think about configuring yourself a new car when you buy one, that configurability is nothing in comparison to what you can configure when you buy our product, which means that from planning perspective, it's phenomenal for customers. But when you try to plan it, it's the other side of the coin, right? It's just very, very complex, and we need a solution that can give us, AI, machine learning, and really deal with, what we are and what we offer. So that's the the very other big thing that we're driving in parallel.
And Joanna, when I think about this, right, when you have a multi-enterprise supply chain network, and something unexpected happens, sometimes you can resolve it in an execution engine. You can resolve it right in the GEP solution. But sometimes you have to go back and do some planning, some replanning, right? So when you went out and you look at these supply chain planning solutions, what were you looking for that would better make it work with this multi-enterprise supply chain network solution?
Yeah, well, exactly that, right? First of all, what is the cutting edge, right? What is the solution? And there are several new solutions out there, right? But what is the solution that is, that is at the forefront? What is the solution that you implement and you're not where people were 5 years ago or where people are now? But what is it that you implement and you will be at the forefront? What is it that can give you that multi-echelon ability of partnering with people? What is it that can give you, scenario planning at your fingertips, whatever scenario you can think of? And scenario planning is a massive thing when you are in supply chain, right? What is it if you want to scenario this versus scenario that, and how do you transfer that to your execution systems, whatever they are? And again, partners, GP, whatever it is that you want to transfer them to. And again, I cannot stress enough that piece about learning, right? Machine learning, AI, and almost living, breathing, organisms and systems versus, I've got a few statistical models and I am so amazing as a planning system, right? That is a thing of the past. That is a thing that doesn't fit the purpose, doesn't fit the bill for us anymore, and probably for many others out there. So it's another thing that we're changing.
Right. So we need to get to question and answer here in the next 5 minutes, but I want to ask one final question of each of you. And if you could just keep it to maybe a minute, that would be great. So what are your final thoughts? We've had this conversation. There must have been something going on in your mind as we had this conversation. Ben, maybe we start with you.
Sure. I would say the key takeaway, again, in these disruptive times, that we must look to future-proof. And as organizations go through that journey, to really look inside and ask the question, what must change? What do we need to do in order to change to future-proof? For some organizations, it could be an organizational change from a people perspective. For others, it could be relooking at processes. And for others, maybe you're ready to launch this kind of digital transformation. And again, it's not just supply chain and procurement, it's really an enterprise-wide transformation. But just know that there are solutions out there. Technology has moved by leaps and bounds, and there's so much possibility and opportunity out there that wasn't available to us 3 years back.
David?
Yeah, I'll go next on that one. I'll make mine simple. I think the key to this is courage. I think it takes courage to lead from the front in this environment. There are too many times we're all inundated with news that make you kind of want to crawl back into bed some days. That's not the world that we want to be dealing with. And that's the world we give companies like HPE with a leader out front who's just setting that vision, setting that tone, stating it's okay to stumble. It's okay to make mistakes. We've got to advance. And that's where I think we have to be. And that's a courageous perspective. When you start thinking about this, not easy, but I got people like Joanna helping, HPE take this leadership mantle. It's really, really critical.
Thank you, David. Well, I'll just say that change is constant, right? I'll say I am happy we are on this journey where we are, that we're not starting to think about it now. Although starting now is better than, starting a year from now, right? Whatever you are is, I would say, start now, because time is of essence and change is constant. We keep joking with my team that there are three things certain in life, right? Death, taxes, and change. You can't avoid change, and especially if you are in supply chain, you will experience change. So it's better to be at the forefront of this change and be the one driving the change versus the one being subject to change, right? It's always better to be in the driver's seat. The world looks much more impressive from there.
Yeah, no, I have a final thought as well. And that is, you know, if you're a supply chain practitioner, you've heard of a warehouse management system. You've heard of supply chain planning. You've heard of transportation management. But COVID certainly taught everyone that agility is a C-level discussion. And the critical solution for agility is multi-enterprise supply chain networks. And just not enough people know about this solution. So that's my final thought. Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm sure there's some good questions rolling in.
Hi, yes, we did get some questions from the audience, so I'll start with this one. Lower inventory equals lower costs, but what are the risks of hampering the customer experience considering the variability of external factors?
So, Alex, I don't know who that was to, or if it was directed towards Joanna, but when lower inventory, lower cost, absolutely. Again, right place, right product, right place, right time. I look at this as the risk in not doing this, and not synchronizing your supply chain to where you should be, is far greater than anything else you're going to do by getting out on this walk a little bit and taking the first steps. So there will be times, but again, if the end users are working properly, the synchronization is working properly, if everybody's got pure transparency and visibility into what is out there and what the expectations are, we're minimizing all of that. And so we don't live in a panacea world where everything is flawless. We expect to have some bumps in the road, as Joanna mentioned, and so we actually expect to have changes to inventories, changes to plans, changes. Bluebirds happen out of the sky, and it's what we do, and it's how we live as supply chain. So the risk of having shortages, we will mitigate. There's an area that we talk about this with the proper planning, with the proper synchronization, the proper visibility, so that all people looking at single constant data, it really will outweigh that. So the risks are still there, will always be there. But now we're looking at this again with a different lens. Overlay that with pure people process technology, and I think you've got a good time.
Yeah, I would add to that.
Alex, if I could just add to that answer, I think low inventory is equal to low cost. That was a paradigm and an equation of the past. I think it's really about having the right amount of inventory in the right place at the right time. So you have the flexibility to make those movements. You have the visibility and that AI, backed by data of what to act on. I think it's really about the right inventory in these times. And if you take a look at GDP slowing down, right, kind of from 3.2% down to 2.7% across the globe, perhaps the number one concern is how do we keep our top line growing, and how does supply chain enable it? And having low inventory is not necessarily the right answer in all circumstances.
Correct. And I will just add that it means having lower inventory for us doesn't mean impacting customer service. And lower inventory comes from the fact that instead of storing it in 20 plus places in the world, you store it in 3. So you don't safety stock in 20 something, you safety stock in 3, which naturally means that your safety stock level can be right sized, right? Which usually means it can get lower, but your fill rate to your customers is actually going to improve. So I hope that helps.
All right, thank you. Next question. This is for David and Ben. What is the first step a company should take to implement this type of solution?
Maybe I could take that, David. I would say the first thing is really establishing the size of the prize and really going after why should you do it? And why should you do it now? And kind of whether it's an internal exercise or engaging, kind of a third party, kind of over say a 6 weeks time period to really identify what is that size of the prize and getting that C-suite alignment that this is going to be a strategic priority and a bet. I think that would be the first step. And obviously selecting the partners, bringing everyone in line, communications, everything will follow. But I think that alignment at the highest level is probably the first step. I'd love to hear Joanna's, kind of commentary on this one, just from an HPA perspective.
Yeah, you're exactly spot on, Ben. That is exactly what we did, right? We had an EC level alignment, right, on why do it, right, and why do we need it? What is it that we expect to get out of this, and why this is absolutely key and critical that we go and we do it now. And we got that alignment, right? So number one is, yes, get that executive alignment and sponsorship, because let's be honest, right, those things, they cost money. Right, they cost money, and you need to get your top leadership signing up for it and saying, yes, we're ready to go and do it.
Yeah, and let me add to that too, Joanna. I actually read. So the other one is, don't look for, key things. I always say, this has gone back for the 30 years I've been doing this. Don't just look for your external partners to solve your inner issues. And so be ready to look in the mirror a little bit. And don't do that later. Do that as you're getting alignment, as you're getting the foundational funding for this. Take that mirror check, right? Make sure we've got a pulse inside and what you want to then move, with your partners. So I think those three things almost have to be done concurrently, to make sure, again, that you go into this with that vision that's shared, and that vision is going to be the beacon, for the next several years. So take the time.
All right, we've got a little more general of one today. So I think any of you guys might be able to give some 2 cents on this. What kind of skill sets will be in demand for supply chain professionals next year and in the years to come?
Boy, that's an interesting.
I do have a perspective here. I think what is happening is a couple things, right? One is, you put in this kind of GEP solution. You have procurement people, right? But they have better visibility to upstream risks. So I think procurement taking a more proactive role around managing risk across this extended supply chain is one place where the skill set is changing. The other thing that I think is happening is, we used to, Joanna talked about a new planning solution. We used to talk about demand planners and supply planners. And now with a solution like GEP, and with modern supply chain planning, you just have a supply chain planner that they do both sides of that issue, of those issues increasingly. So that would be my 2 cents.
I would say from my perspective, I think supply chain procurement professionals of the future, I think the number one skill, again, is not analytics and being top negotiators, but really being the best trusted advisors. So, that business partnering skill, whether it is with finance, whether it is with trade, whether it's with suppliers that may actually be larger than you are, I think that business partnering skill is going to be very, very important. And you apply that to innovation, you apply that to planning. It opens up whole new doors of opportunity. I think the second one is, I think it's time to hit kind of reset, refresh on everyone in supply chain and procurement having that digital first mindset. And there is a component to training, there's a component to understanding what is out there, but also asking that simple question, what is the art of the possible? And one example that I wanted to give from this HP example is even simple things such as working backward. Individuals in the cross-functional teams have to be empowered. And there was one critical success factor where we had UAT and SIT. Kind of think about more than 100 use cases. 100 business decisions that needed to be made across 8 different companies. And the only way we could do it is by having these team members come together in one physical space. Despite COVID, despite travel bans, despite cost pressures. So team members being empowered to make that call to drive that success. So again, going back to David's point as well, that courage, that ambition, I think those skills, I would say would be my top 3.
All right. Okay, last question, and it's for Joanna. So tell us, how do you expect this solution to increase your supply chain visibility, and what are you hoping the major benefits of that are going to be?
So I think we probably already talked about it, right? So it will it will dramatically, increase our visibility, because like I said, we'll see, how our forecast got transmitted to our suppliers, right? We'll see it real time. We'll see it being acknowledged. We'll see what portion of the forecast is committed versus not. We'll see the POs placed against that forecast. We'll see the POs being acknowledged, right? We'll see, the parts coming in and with what dates, is it fitting, is it not fitting? And while we expect GP to handle, this, we will be partnering together on, okay, what needs to be done with it. So we'll have that visibility, and we'll have that visibility real time. So once we're deployed, everywhere end to end, that visibility is going to come. So it will be a drastic, improvement from where we are today. So, our expectations are huge, but at the same time, they're very, very realistic. And that's the super exciting part about it.
All right. Well, that's all the time we had for questions today. If you asked a question and it was not answered, we will be following up with you after this presentation. There will also be a link to the on-demand version of this presentation sent out to all registrants and attendees as well. I wanted to thank all of our panelists today and our moderator for this very engaging discussion. And thank you to the attendees for your interest in the topic.